Alright everyone, right now there is uproar on Reddit as a bunch of subreddits have been banned and quarantined. It's another purge. This sort of happened before, I think a couple of years ago now it was, when that Commie first got put into place as their dear leader. You know, that woman who's literally a Chinese communist and I think still runs Reddit. That might explain why you've got a problem with overt censorship, but I thought it was funny. Here's the problem. And even parts of the alternative media sometimes do this, because you get echo chambers in a hyper-partisan climate. I was looking, at this. I don't use Reddit and I don't really care per se, but, if it's big in tech news, I'm probably at least dimly aware of it. I'm more of a 4chan user. But this is, significant enough, I suppose. It's newsworthy. I should probably talk about it from maybe a unique perspective, because I'm looking and I'm seeing even sort of maybe the tertiary tech sites. They've got these vastly different appraisals of what's actually happened. Some of them are focusing on the left and they're saying, well, Reddit is purging Nazis, and that's a good thing. Now, others are saying, well, they're purging any page that they think is edgy. This is a bad thing. It's censorship. And then there were some people that are like, oh, they're quarantining communist subreddits and socialists and stuff. Shame on them, basically. This is appeasement to the far right or something. I take up a much more prosaic style of explanation, which is simply Reddit is conducting censorship. Why don't you just leave it at that? It doesn't really matter who's being censored. That's the whole point. People keep boiling censorship down to an us and them mentality. The only us and them is who is doing the censoring, who is being censored. If it's going on, it is simply just censorship. It doesn't really matter who the victim is, and you are victimized when censorship is applied. It really doesn't matter. Reddit is a massive corporate entity. It's a business. It's a for-profit entity, so this is corporate censorship. The Reddit user base, maybe the snowflakes that are still remaining there, won't have a problem with it. They're probably the same people that are like, Zuckerberg should censor everything, and YouTube should tell you what is or is not real news, and, Google and Bing and all, and, everything else, they should manipulate their search results to preclude some of the scary stuff that we don't like. Because, we want to sanitize the internet and make it like cable, basically. And one hand will wash the other as payment processors, domain registrars, and social media platforms all beat up on one another's enemies while making it look less obvious that it's actually a corporate trust. That's basically what happens. And this is a reason why I prefer 4chan, because there one of the main goals is to be edgy in some cases. Literally, pissing people off. Trolling is part of the purpose that it exists for, or, raiding, although it's officially not allowed. And crazy shit like that. And on Reddit, it's like they're trying to be presentable. I wonder about the fiscal wisdom of a move like this. You've got a platform that the lamestream finds overtly edgy, even though, Reddit is tame, again, compared to, 4chan. It's even tame compared to some of the Tumblr stuff. Fairly tame. It's basically a PG-13 site for many purposes across much of its bulk. But it's perceived of as being really, really edgy. They're trying to clean it up, so they're pissing off the people that like what edginess is there. They're not ingratiating themselves to normie culture, like outside of the internet. That's not the way that things work. It's better to be a dark underbelly. It's better to be more edgy. It can extend the lifespan of a website. All of these big Silicon Valley-style firms that are attempting to go from being R-rated to, Y7 or something. They don't even, I think, realize how bad that is long-term for their brands. They're making a mistake that a lot of other groups have made. It's like, we're going to be family-friendly now. In other words, we're going to be more censored. Somehow this is a good approach. That's not the way that the world works. The way to work it is to remain on the edge. You remain on the cutting edge, no problem. But Reddit's been censoring things, especially political opinions, for a while. It is a little bit, a little bit odd. A big coincidence that happens to be, of course, right before the midterms. Therefore, they're scrubbing, I think, what they're doing, because the Reddit administration is far left. Let's not mince words. In this case, it is at least partially pure politics. They want to get rid of, right-wing pages because they don't want people spreading, memes about how shitty the Democratic Party is, or defending Trump, or debunking, stuff. Only Snopes is allowed to do that, 2 people and their cat, or 10 cats, I think. And meanwhile, The corporate neoliberals also don't want the far left organizing too much because they tend to say cringy stuff, and so it makes the left look bad and is easily exploited. Hey, look, here's this far left, this is fucking Bernie Sanders, like democratic socialist so-called or whatever, and here's memes of them saying weird shit, and then you circulate them, and it is propaganda, it's political propaganda, certainly. The corporate neoliberals are better at image control. They're boring, they're inefficient, they're ineffectual, they're living in the 1990s, but they're still better at brand control than the far left. The far left has deep, deep problems when it comes to actually branding itself. It doesn't seem to realize that the tiny minority of people that it's whipped up into a frenzy in support of socialism or Marxism or whatever is a tiny minority of the population, and generally other people, we might humor them or consider them like harmless idiots, but we still consider them idiots, for the most part. That's the way that it works. It's like when I see someone advocating for like Leninism or something, I'm like, okay, all right, National Bolshevism or something, okay, then that's fine, but it's still kooky and it's not going to work. You're never going to implement it, so, I don't sit there worrying about these people. Although there have been calls to literal explicit violence on Twitter, and normally, if you're calling for violence or harassing people or doing crazy shit, Jack Dorsey doesn't care unless you happen to be, conducting journalism and, basically Microsoft tells him that he should ban you, or Facebook does or something. Or somebody, Merkel says, oh, this person's problematic. Get rid of them. Jack Dorsey is basically, it seems, just a pawn. Maybe because Twitter is the third wheel. with Google and technically Apple on the app stores and Facebook and YouTube on maybe the more hosting side, Twitter is really the odd man out. They're the weakest of them. Reddit, meanwhile, is nowhere near the size of Twitter, even though it is a gargantuan site. But they're steadily, I think, eroding their own brand in the same way that Twitter is. See, here's the thing. Twitter begins censoring, drawing attention to its problems, and making up wacky solutions that won't work, and they don't work, they make the problem worse. They've begun to lose users. At some point, the same thing could happen to Reddit. Meanwhile, sites that, are purposely controversial, they're not declining. Some of them are growing quite quickly, including alt tech. I think 4chan is going to be the wave of the future. I actually believe that. Maybe smaller than Reddit right now, but if Reddit collapses, guess where a lot of those people are going to be going. There's a lot of cross shitposting that goes along. So, you've got people that are users of both sites and they're more familiar with one another's platforms. But the Reddit team making a big mistake, and then the way it's covered by people, it tends to fall into the same flawed echo chamber. And that's the whole point, is the corporations love it. The corporations want you to believe that all this censorship is purely political. They don't want you to see it for what it really is. It's just censorship, and it's for money purposes. They don't want you on their platforms because they're getting more money from other corporations that seek to use their platforms. They don't want the independent media or independent memes being made. They want the late night comedians making people laugh. The late night comedians whose broadcasting networks can give them tens of millions a year for the purpose of using a platform to generate additional attention and revenue. They don't want them competed with 1,000, B-list comedians. They don't want to compete with, basically anyone with a webcam who has a sense of humor. The nightly news can't compete with, online commentators either. It's not even just YouTube. I mean, it's alt tech, BitChute, Minds, Gab. It's YouTube, people who use Twitter, even people who use like Facebook pages, and certainly a place like Reddit or 4chan, things get spread around. They're all going to target the alternative culture that's been built around the internet because it poses an existential threat to corporations. Corporations don't want existential threats to their existence, so they're going to seek to use any moral means they can to censor us. Simple as that. That's about all. Peace out.